All right, welcome back to PacWest Bigfoot. Happy early spring. Hope you guys had a great Easter weekend last week. And as a matter of fact, I want to say thank you so very much to you. Yes, you. For being patient with me and not having, a PacWest Bigfoot encounter story last week. I was busy, actually in the middle of cramming for my real estate exam here in Oregon, which I passed. And I wanted to say thank you guys so very much for all your congratulatory comments and whatnot on the Facebook page. And I really look forward to getting out there and working with folks again. I have been here working from a home office for about 10 years. And I think what I want to do with the rest of my life is just, do some of these awesome campfire like Bigfoot encounter stories and sell some property. And hopefully something that Bigfoot is inhabiting. How's that sound? Awesome. If I find one, I'll let you know. Anyways, wanted to give a shout out there to a good friend of mine named Mike over there at Blue Ridge Bigfoot. If you guys can get over there, check him out, see what he's got going on. Got some great, awesome, based on true campfire tales from out there in the Blue Ridge Mountain area. And I think you guys will really enjoy that. And I want to give a huge thing real quick. And I know I'm going to have to clear my throat a little bit today because it's a long encounter story. But I wanted to do one more thing. Let me take a sip of this. Monster X Radio. Right now, I'm about to finish everything up on it for them, but they have an actual premium podcast going on, and not just one, but four for the price of one. So I want to let you guys know right now that you guys can get over there this coming Monday. All right, you guys can get over there on Monday. You can sign up, and I'm telling you what, you're going to get the best podcast. You're going to get interviews. You're going to get in-depth research. You're going to get all kinds of really cool stuff from Gunnar Monson and Shane Corson and Tom. I think it's Tom Suid. You're going to get all this really cool just information from these guys over at Monster X. And so I am plugging them. So if you want to complain to me about plugging stuff on here, please comment below. I will delete your comment. Anyways, with that, thank you guys so much for your patience. I love you guys. You guys here in this PacWest Bigfoot community, just the Bigfoot community in general. You guys are just wonderful, and you're awesome. And thank you so very much for giving me that space last week to do what I had to do for me and my family. So from my family to yours, I hope you guys had a wonderful Easter. He is risen. And here we go with this week's PacWest Bigfoot encounter story. All right. And I think I can mute it. And we're back. Man encounters Bigfoot on his property outside Keno, Oregon. This was way back in 1985 when Keno, Oregon was even smaller than it is today. But I had a Bigfoot, well, multiple Bigfoot, nearly scare me off my property. I've heard many a report and story, even on your channel here, Dave, of Bigfoot seeming rather threatening when people move into a new area or property. I share their sentiment. It does not feel rather scary. It does feel rather scary, and you do feel rather threatened by Bigfoot when you move in on their land because they let you know you did. However, you can live in peace with them. At least I have so far. Here's my story. The Bigfoot and my life in Keno. I inherited the land from my father, and he did from his father, and so on since the first of the Europeans spread all the way back from back east and into Oregon. Even back then, there were some stories my father told me about both the natives around the area and the pioneers, you'd call them, that came out west, and all had their run-ins with the creature known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot. The natives told of a menacing giant that was to be avoided at all costs. The pioneers, well, they never listened. It ended up in some sort of trouble or simply disappeared in the woods of southern Oregon. Not many, but few. But I took them as hearsay and or tales made up to scare me while out camping with the old man. Soon enough, however, I'd come to learn that what my father described seeing twice in his life was in fact real, and they were really frightening and unpredictable to say the least. And I swear, they knew my name. Let me share with you real quick my dad's encounter. It'll sort of set the stage for what I walked right into with my eyes wide open, but unfortunately my brain completely closed off. I wanted to believe my dad. I did eventually, but back then my mind was just would not follow him down that road. He too inherited the property, nearly 87 acres up out of Keno along the Green Springs Highway in southern Oregon. He never did anything on the property but hunt and fish along the Klamath River. It was still dense forest out here to the southwest, and of course a bit thinner and flatter to the north out towards Klamath Falls, but it was wooded here nonetheless. He was out fishing both times he had seen and heard Bigfoot, and I mean that in a plural sense, and as he could hear them communicating back and forth on both occasions. To make a long story short, he'd parked on the south side of the highway up a small old driveway. From there, he walked back across the road and down to the river. This was the furthest point of the property to the northeast. Both times he was followed or shadowed by a couple or more Bigfoot. From chirp-like sounds to whistles and grunts and barks, he'd heard it all he said. Both visuals would happen during dusk and when he would head back to his old truck, which I still own today. Reddish brown in color, not the truck. The face was almost hairless, and the only part of the body that was so. He said he could see the whites of its eyes beneath a really thick and heavy brow line. There was a bit of a neck, however, something I did not notice in my own encounter and visual, but he said he did. About 8 feet tall, he said, as he was comparing them to the trees nearby later on. One of them, though, was a female, as it did have breasts. Like a female ape, he would say they were like. The skin on the face and hands seemed very thick and leathery, and the color was not dark at all, but a kind of off-tannish orangish, he said. They never tried to attack him or anything, but he said they were unpredictable, and he had to replace the back window of the truck that was smashed in twice by large rocks he'd found on the floorboard. But that is some of what he shared. My story, however, was a little more menacing and threatening at first, for sure. The Boogeyman of Keno. I will try to get right to the point here, saying how I shared some of my dad's encounters. But I do want to say that there have been tales of the boogeyman of the woods in this part of southern Oregon for as long as I can remember. I had a ton of little incidents here and there, but I will share the 3 main encounters and experiences that shook me to my boots out here on the property. I do want to mention the first time I knew something was literally afoot on my land. I was up there deciding where I was going to finally build a home upon it. Up until that point, the property was unimproved, just land. From time to time, we'd camp on our land growing up, also hunt on it, and park on it, and hike on down to the river or go fishing. And this was the first time there would be a home on it. No, I never experienced any Bigfoot anything up to that point. I wanted to stay somewhat back from the road, but I did not want to be so far back that it seemed like a family trip just trying to get back to the Green Springs Highway. I was out that day looking for the perfect spot. I did not want the hillside. I wanted only a view of the trees in front of me and the sky above me. I was out walking around when I kept getting that feeling of being watched. Once I thought I had heard a whistle, but I was not quite sure about that, so I thought it was just a weird bird of some kind or another. No thoughts of Bigfoot at the time entered my mind, but later it would. Anyways, I heard the whistle-like sound that day, and the whole time I was out there wandering around, I kept looking over my shoulder. Forward 1 year, and I would be doing what I could to get these things off my property, and for good. That is no boogeyman. It's a flippin' monster. Other than that day of feeling like I was being watched and the whistle, I had no solid warning signs of what I was about to see. Without a reference for it in my mind, it made for a very, very scary and frightening moment in my life. I felt like wetting myself, to be honest. I was back up at the property that morning. I was living in Klamath Falls at the time while waiting for the house to be built. I met my friend, a builder and developer out there, and we were looking at the blueprints and all the paperwork that was finally approved through the county. Nothing crazy happened that morning. All was rather normal and quiet, actually. But not minutes after he left, I was confronted with a Bigfoot. My friend pulled out and took off down the driveway, one I'd scraped and graveled out about 6 months earlier with a loader, which I'd have to do again eventually. I headed over to my truck, but decided to briefly take a walk around for a few and enjoy the morning just a bit longer, and my property. Besides, I don't smoke in the car and wanted a cigarette. I grabbed my pack of camels and shut the door. I was barely through the first few pulls, or drags, as they call it, and that is when I heard something hit the back of my truck like a pebble or a small rock. I turned and looked, then looked up into the trees to see if anything fell from one. Thud! Right on my back, I felt that one. I'm not sure it was trying to hit me per se, but it did. It was a small rock, no bigger than a large, big, large marble you'd play with as a kid. It still hurt a bit. It hit near the top of my right shoulder blade. I turned and saw something I definitely never expected to see ever. Bigfoot. It stood there with its massive body swaying back and forth next to a tree, just staring at me. Its upper lip, by the way, kept flipping up and down, all weird-like, and showing its huge block teeth. It was tall, I'd say about between 7 and 8 foot for sure. It was a light reddish-brown color and blended very well with the spring foliage of the forest that time of the year. It took me a second to come to my senses and realize what I was looking at, and the position I might have found myself in. It was a massive creature. You could tell that it was nothing but muscle underneath its long hair. And the hands, just one could cover my face and then some, and pick me up all at the same time. It started making a hissing-like sound as it kept swaying back and forth, and flipping its top lip up and down. I started shaking my boots, and the sound really made me feel frightened. I felt like it was trying to scare me off, and it wanted me gone now. His teeth were blocked, it seemed, but it was too far away. I was too far away to notice any canines at the time. I slowly backed up a couple feet and jumped in the truck. I started it and started backing down the driveway. All of a sudden, that giant monster started running, or whatever you call that weird stride it took, right after me. I hit the gas. I kept looking over my shoulder to see the road and back again to see where the Bigfoot was, and it was still heading right for me. It never touched the truck, but it kept pace all the way down the driveway. Right before I hit the main road, I looked back, and it was gone. Home. Home on the range. It would be a month until I headed back to the property. No, I was not scared anymore at that point. I was actually a little mad at myself for not confronting that thing with my gun and instead just running away. I was not going to be run off by Bigfoot. Not now that I have invested a ton of time and money into building my home, the home I want to pass on to my own family one day. I just did not want to pass on the monster that came with it, however. Power, water, and a leach field or septic system were being put in 1 month later. Nobody, not one worker mentioned anything about Bigfoot or anything out of the ordinary happening. I even chatted with another younger guy who was the backhoe operator and believed in Bigfoot. He had found a few prints up near Lake of the Woods one winter, he mentioned, but no mention of anything while on the job there. I figured it was probably a Bigfoot passing through. I was wrong. The second experience would prove to me that not only was I not dreaming that day, although I knew I was not, it would also prove to me that there was multiple Bigfoot on the property and that they lived there too. This second encounter was not as scary or dramatic, but they saw me and I saw them. Things were going great, and work was getting done at a breakneck speed, which was perfect. I decided that all was good and I was going to scrape the driveway again one weekend and do some fishing while I was out there. I would camp on the property and use the truck to sleep in. Yes, I was a little apprehensive after the incident a month before, but nothing since was heard or noticed, so I figured I'd bring a gun and would be just fine. The property is really beautiful. I started noticing this fact more and more as the site of the home site started coming together. The thought of Bigfoot by the end of that Friday started fading away. By Saturday afternoon, I was done scraping again, eventually, and the rock would be laid and rolled and compressed into the ground later that weekend. I was coming back from fishing when I heard something pacing me up the driveway and back to the truck. I was pretty nervous at that point, as I knew it could only be a Bigfoot. But I was wrong. It was two Bigfoot. All of a sudden, I heard it to my left, the pacing that was. And this time, they decided not to hide the fact they were there, as I could finally see them weaving in and out of trees about 30 yards or so from me. It was thick with trees out here, to be sure, but not thick enough I could not see I was being paced by two monstrous Bigfoot. It seemed to me as I sped up that they were literally coming closer, like they were going to, well, flank me or something. I freaked out and ran as fast as I could back to the truck. They too sped up their pace, and although I thought they were going to cut me off, they stayed back just inside the trees. But I could make out the one Bigfoot I'd seen before, and another one, a bit taller and dark brown in color. Its skin, the new Bigfoot that is, was leathery and a bit more gray palish in color, but the bulk and basic body in general looked like the other. I made it to the truck, grabbed my handgun, but I did not leave. I was going to stand my ground this time. I did not want to be run off my property, period. It was a few seconds or so before I heard a loud tink, tink. I heard a small pebble hit my truck again. I was not going to shoot unless I was forced to, even as they approached me at that moment. They stood there on either side of my driveway. I could see them clearly as the lot that was now clear of trees where they stood. Massive monsters of the woods just swaying back and forth. My dad was right. There was something else here on the property, and they lived here too. Maybe that's why he never built a home here. It took them less than 30 seconds to realize I was going nowhere, I believe, and they turned and left. I stood there for another couple minutes to just calm down when I swear I heard my name being called. Just once, but I heard a really poor rendition of my name being called from the woods in a really raspy, deep, crazy voice. I heard a Bigfoot say, "Ken!" My name is Ken, after my father, but it sounded like it was saying Ken. They live here. While the first two visuals seemed a little threatening, the last one did not. But if I were you, I would not trust these things, and yes, they are omnivores. They eat meat too. I found a dead buck about 200 yards away to the southwest of the lot that now had a foundation and framework being worked at the time 2 months later. Its head was gone, so were 3 of its legs. I was especially interested in what else I saw. The guts were all missing, and the chest and stomach of the carcass was literally ripped open. Not sliced, like what a knife would do. This was a kill. It was an animal kill. I know there are wolves about, no matter what some say. I'd seen them. They are few, but they are here. I've seen cougar, bobcat, and tons of bear, and none of them could have created the kind of damage that I saw there. And it was not some hunter illegally hunting on my property, either. It was Bigfoot. I just knew it. I backed out of there and headed back to the construction site. It was evening when I would have the closest encounter I would ever have, and the last sighting ever again. Well, so far at least. I was doing some of the building myself. I wanted to have my hand in all of it, I suppose. I decided to take a break and get a little something to eat before I started in on some framing before it got dark. I sat on the back of my truck when I got that crazy and uneasy feeling of being watched again. And I was. I was being watched from not 10 to 15 feet away. I turned to my left and then to my right. Eventually, I slowly stood up and turned around. It was not even 10 feet on the other side of my truck by that point. How it got that close to me, I did not know, but I never heard that thing walk up on me. I was paralyzed with fear. My gun was under my seat in the truck between me and it. It was panting almost at that point, and when the breeze came up, I could smell this thing. It was like rotten onions and skunk. It was not overpowering like some have said, but I could smell it nonetheless. It was the reddish-brown one again, and I guess some would say cinnamon in color. However, I could better see the face at this point, which really was leathery and long and was the color of a dark redwood-stained coffee table if you've ever seen one. It looked, well, kind of deformed, I guess you could say as well. It was a massive thing, tall, like I stated before, and only this close up it seemed more like a giant. It did not flip its lip this time, but it still did not seem like it was all that happy with me. It had, well, what looked like a scowl on its face, and its dark eyes just looked right through me. I felt scared, but not threatened. Not like when I was paced or the other time when the lip flipping was going on. This time it was as if it was letting me know that it was there. It is not going anywhere. But it also knew I was there as well. It was its posture, I believe, the way it stood there and snuck up on me. I suppose that made me feel as though it was telling me all this at that moment. Could have taken me at any time up to that point, but it didn't. I do not believe in the telepathy stuff. Some do. But I can tell you that these things are highly intelligent, can seriously live and thrive right under your nose without you ever knowing or ever seeing any sign. It looked at me as it stopped swaying, and I remember distinctly that it leaned forward and barked at me once. It was really strange. I noticed at that point that it did have some sizable canines inside that scary and big mouth after all. Its bark, by the way, was loud and deep and made me flinch. You could almost feel it. It turned right after that and disappeared into the trees. That was the last time I'd seen him or any of them again. Home for you and me. The home was finally completed months later. I moved in and eventually got married. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. I see no sign of the Bigfoot on the property, no prints, no animal kills, no structures, no nothing. But from time to time, I do still get that sense of being watched from the woods when out in the garden or down by the river fishing. And once in a while, my wife or I do hear something off in the distance, like a holler or a scream, or, I don't know, a howling of some kind. But that is all. And that we could contribute to a mountain lion or a wolf. Personally, however, I believe it is them, and I believe they are still around, just out of sight, but still around nonetheless. Thanks. Ken.